Hello, I'm Matt Ballantyne. I'm the creator of Playcards. That also shows I can read, which is brilliant. What I'm going to do in this video is talk through the underlying thinking that's gone into making Playcards. You may have received a prototype version of it, and so this hopefully will get you started on understanding the thinking behind the cards and what you might do with them. Just a bit of background, Playcards are the culmination of 3 attempts to be able to write a book, and that comes out after about 6 years of doing research looking at how well, my theory is that there's basically not enough play at work, and particularly if you want to innovate and do change, we need to get better at doing things that feel quite unwork-like. And the reason why the book didn't happen was because I tried and tried and tried, but I couldn't make it playful. And then at the beginning of 2021, I had a moment of revelation where I realised that actually I could turn it into a set of playing cards, and then the theories would become playful. So that's the idea behind the kind of the medium in which they've been created. Now, underpinning Playcards is a very simple model, and it's a model that describes the world in 2 ways, in terms of problems and in terms of solutions, and things that we know and things that we don't know. Now, my contention is that organisations, for the most part, are pretty good when it comes to implementing known problems to known solutions. This is at the core of industrial manufacturing, and my feeling is that for many organisations we see businesses as mechanisms, as engineering. And we even talk about business process re-engineering. I've been talking about that for years, since Hammer and Champney and all those guys in the 80s. But the minute things fall out of this realm of known problems and known solutions, stuff starts to go a bit awry. Now, one of the ways in which stuff goes awry is if you've got a known solution but an unknown problem. Now, in the technology industry, where I've worked much of my career, this is all over the place. Absolutely all over the place. And so what you get is a new technology, say blockchain at the moment, or big data, or whatever else. And in a particular sector, if a group of companies start to say that they're innovating the world away through blockchain, then everybody else starts to do it, even though underneath it all, it's all emperor's new clothes. Nobody knows why they're doing it or what they're doing with it. Now, it does serve a purpose. It serves a purpose of showing that you're as innovative as the next company. And I think organisations often get trapped into doing this known solution to unknown problem thing. It also gives technology a really bad name, but that's another story. At the bottom half of this, though, it starts to get really interesting, and that's where the focus of the play card sits. When we don't know what the solution is to a problem, we start to get really problematic, because we have structures in our organisations that simply assume that we know what the solution is before we do it. So a business case is a long justification that will usually involve saying, the answer to the known problem is this is what we'll do, this is how much money that we will need to do it, this is how much cost it will save or money it will generate, and it's all net benefits, so therefore crack on. And they're acts of fiction for the most part. We have seen the emergence of Agile, so the idea of iterative approaches that are far less predicated on the idea that we know what we're going to do before we do it. But Agile working in organisations that are still sort of largely structured around a world of known problems with known solutions is quite a challenge. And then the final quadrant, which is the one that is the really interesting one for me, is unknown solutions, unknown problems, where we're just experimenting, where we're just seeing what the art of the possible might be. Some years ago I spent some time working for a law firm, and with a very long story behind it, we essentially managed to buy a virtual reality rig, which we set up in the offices of this law firm when they had their annual big partner event, and all the partners there, 350 partners milling around, getting a bit drunk, and then we had this VR thing that enabled you to paint virtual reality 3D stuff, or it enabled you to be able to go undersea and be surrounded by fish and whales, and it was an amazing thing. And there were 3 categories of people that I encountered that night amongst the partners. The first were the complete refuseniks, people who didn't want to have anything to do with this nonsense, wouldn't talk to me about it, wouldn't even come over and look at it, and they just obviously were thinking, why is my money being spent on this novelty nonsense? The second group of people were the ones who would come up and they'd say, that looks quite interesting, what will it mean for the world of law? And slightly more politely than this, but essentially I'd say, you're the lawyer, you tell me. Because they wanted to know what it was a solution to. What problems was it solving? They wanted things to be known problem, known solution. And what I was doing was confronting them with something that was unknown in both dimensions. The people who thrived with this stuff were the ones who said, that looks really interesting, can I have a go? And they'd put the headset on and they'd immerse themselves into these virtual 3D worlds. And coming out of it, they'd say, that's really interesting. I can't see what relevance it has to me, but it was fun, thank you. Or they'd come out and say, that was really interesting. I can't see the relevance that would have for me, but I feel slightly sick. Or for a couple of cases, they come out and say, that's really interesting, and I can see how we could use that in property law to allow our lawyers to be able to be cited in the place where they're actually drawing up the papers for. That would be amazing. Or I could see how our health and safety and HR lawyers could use this to be able to take to the boardroom some of the challenges that we see in the workplace, so that we could highlight the dangerous machinery in their plant or whatever else. So being able to get people to be able to engage with this stuff is about jumping into these unknown unknowns, certainly unknown solutions, often unknown problems with unknown solutions. So 4 different styles for these 4 different quadrants. We have a planning style for known problems, known solutions. People often talk about waterfall, the idea of being able to predict the future and that. And there's many cases where this is absolutely possible, and it's cool, crack on. We've got a follow style, which is this idea of we're doing it because everybody else is doing it to make ourselves look innovative, but we have no idea why we're doing it. There's no purpose behind it other than to maintain our brand, credibility, value, whatever else. And then the bottom, we've got 2 more styles. There's an adaptive style, which is about, you know what the problem is, you have an idea of direction, you try, you test, you see what happens, does it work, doesn't it? Yes, it works, adapt, iterate, and just continue to be able to take small steps, assessing along the way if you're heading towards the goal that you think is the problem you need to solve. Sometimes, of course, you find it's not the right problem anyway and you go off in a different direction. Another story. And then finally, we've got tinkering. This is the kind of pure world of just curiosity and seeing what happens. So that's the places where you need to adapt different styles. My play model doesn't talk about the stuff at the top here now, because I think that organisations are pretty well adapted to that, and this is just basically hokum. Down the bottom is where the skills that I've identified. So what we end up with is 13 skills, 13 play skills that help us at the bottom of that grid. And they fall into 3 categories. We've got skills around collaboration, and that's because for us to be able to innovate, we need to work with others. It's not a single player game. It's very much a team act. We've got skills around iteration. So how do you make those small steps that we saw in the iterate quadrant to be able to head towards what you think the problem is? Or how do you explore with curiosity in the tinkering world, learning as you go? And then finally, we've got the deviate skills, because if you're going to do things differently, if you are going to challenge the established norm, if you are going to make change happen, you've got to go against the culture. You've got to make things different. You've got to be able to say, this isn't right, we need to do it differently, or this is right but it's not as good as it could be, or this doesn't exist at the moment, we need to do something completely different. And deviation from the norm is discomforting. Quite a lot of what comes out within the cards, I think, is an exploration of actually helping people to understand discomfort and understand how to be able to embrace it rather than run scared of it. So let's quickly run through the 13 skills. In collaboration, working out loud. Now, working out loud is the idea of being able to talk about what you do to others whilst you do it, rather than only telling people about what you've done after you've done it. This comes to mind through the ways in which people work with things like blogs, or being able to use social networks to be able to give a running commentary, not of the, oh look, I'm so successful, aren't I great, but I'm looking at this problem, has anybody else seen it? Or I've got this idea, is it a good idea? Working out loud is incredibly powerful as a way to be able to allow change to happen both within and outside of organisations. I think a lot of the time people are trained into keeping things secret until you've finished, making sure that you don't put anything out other than the final article, everything's polished. And it's quite a shift for people to be able to be more transparent in how they're working. The next collaborative skill is around forging diverse networks. Now, by diversity here, I mean both a combination of the kind of diversity and inclusion model of protected characteristics, ethnicity and gender and religion and but actually it's more broad than that. It's about being able to make sure that you're not just surrounding yourselves with people who are just like you, whether that is from a perspective of personality, or whether that's from a perspective of your beliefs, or whether that's a perspective from your profession or from your organisation. What are you doing to go out to be able to meet and build relationships with people who aren't like you? Because the broader your network, the better chance, especially if you're working out loud, that you'll have a chance that you'll solve problems through the collective wisdom of people from different perspectives. And then the final one is in collaboration is understanding how to play in teams. The act of doing innovation and change might be project-like work, it might be ideation type work, it might be the sort of work that you do as just delivering service and making incremental improvement all the time. Now, all of those different types of work involve different types of team, and being able to understand the nature of those teams and what those teams need to support their activity, because it's different from just the general day-to-day business as usual. Doing change is a different set of skills. Doing innovation and coming up with ideas and making them stick and getting hearts and minds won, you need different skills within the team and different structures of team for that to happen. Okay, over now to the iterate section. First one is minimize time to product. What do I mean by that? I again and again see organizations thinking about innovation, and they'll have an innovation solution, and that will involve people submitting innovative ideas into an innovation box, and they'll put those things in that innovation box into a big list, and then they will spend loads of time evaluating whether they are good ideas or not, rather than finding ways to, as quickly as possible, turn the idea into a testable thing. Now, there's a concept in software development called minimum viable product. It's a little bit like that, but actually often what we're talking about are ways of being able to test an idea that don't involve building the whole thing, but just being able to put something out there. Now, it might be, and I've done this loads over the years, a tweet. You've got a question that you think might be on your way to something useful, tweet it, see what comes back. Now, you need a bit of an audience and a following within Twitter for that to happen, so I've spent the last 10 years building one up, not just for that, it's because I find it interesting and curious and whatever. But anyway, you need to be able to find ways to be able to prototype things. I use a lot of these, which are wonderful John Wilshire's artifact cards. You can do a lot of prototyping using bits of paper or string, or even, look at this, bag of Lego. These sorts of things help you to be able to test ideas quickly so that you can try out to see whether it is a good idea, rather than trying to assess whether it's a good idea as a theoretical exercise. Waste of time. Next up, ban the use of the word fail. There's a big movement in, again, the world of software development that talks about failing fast and how you don't learn until you fail and yada yada yada. And my argument is that the word failure is too culturally loaded because it means bad things, so stop talking about it. Rather than talking about failure, talking about experiments, talk about hypotheses that you're going to test, talk about whether a hypothesis is proven or disproven, learn from it, move on. Stop talking about failure unless it is a failure that means you're going to get sacked, in which case continue to talk about that sort of failure, just don't do them. Excellent. Next one, scale transactions, foster interactions. Give you a little analogy for this one. An interaction would be to go to a branch of Tiffany's and to buy a wedding ring for your fiance. A transaction would be to buy that exact same wedding ring from Amazon. Now, the output is identically the same. You have a wedding ring, but the outcome is dramatically different. The experience of going to Tiffany's is a sensory thing. It's a thing that's loaded with cultural meaning. It is very much an interaction. Buying things on Amazon is purely transactional. And you can scale transactions very well. It's very hard to scale interactions. And if you want to have interactions with people in what you're doing, whether you change how you're changing things, you can convert them into transactions, but you will lose great richness. That's fine if you're willing to lose that richness. Otherwise, you need to foster those interactions rather than thinking you can scale them like you can an internet transaction. That's the thinking behind that one. Next up, put tactility everywhere. As I've already mentioned, I use a lot of these. I've got, well, of course, the cards that you may well have in your hand right now. There's something about touching things that changes the way in which we interact with them. And there's something about having ideas turned into bits of cardboard or post-it notes or blocks of Lego that enable us to be able to work with them and externalize them and feel them and move them around. And I don't fully understand the psychology of it, but something magical happens. So try to think about how you can make the virtual or the purely theoretical into something tactile that you can then move and play with. Next up, copy without shame. We are told from school that copying is bad. Write out plagiarism or copyright theft is bad, and there's no doubt about that. But when it comes to ideas, copying, and particularly copying a bit craply, is a really interesting way to be able to go about it. My favourite story of bad copying turned good is the song Smells Like Teen Spirit by Nirvana, which, if you're of my age and into that sort of music, was apparently Kurt Cobain trying to sound like the Pixies, in which he failed miserably, but in turn created what can only be described as a rock anthem. Now, last category. We're nearly there, people. Deviate. As I said up front, there's a lot of times when you are going to feel deeply discomforted by what is going on in trying to innovate. So we need to be able to unpack that a bit and do some things that either help us to understand that or actually force us further out of our comfort zone. So, for example, embrace imposter syndrome. I get imposter syndrome all the time. Putting this video together, I am feeling imposter syndrome. Why does anybody want to listen to little old me? Standing in front of a room of people with a bunch of people playing with my play cards, I get a sense of massive imposter syndrome. Putting myself in positions where I feel discomfort, I get a sense of imposter syndrome. Now, I speak from a position of massive privilege. I'm white, I'm middle-aged, I'm middle class, I'm straight, I have no disabilities other than to have to wear glasses. I'm in a position of immense privilege. But even I experience imposter syndrome. And I think it's something to be embraced, because if you're experiencing it, quite a bit of it is because you're doing something new. And if you want to do change and innovation and different stuff and new things, you've got to do new things. And you will therefore probably feel imposter syndrome. Embrace it. Next up, be an artist. I've talked a lot with artists and actors and comedians over the course of the research for this. And one of the things I find really interesting about what artists do is they act as almost a mirror to the world to enable us to be able to reflect upon ourselves. And I think that's a very powerful idea. And when we think about making change happen in organisations, how can you think more like an artist to be able to be the mirror that the organisation reflects upon, rather than some sort of autocrat who's just telling people what to do? It's an interesting thing to explore. Is your work art? Is my work art? Well, who knows? Next up, make time and space for play. None of this happens if you ain't got time for it. People get trapped in firefighting. Firefighting is a really daft metaphor. I went to speak to a firefighter because I do research for things, and when I said about this firefighting that people talk about in offices, Phil laughed. He laughed because he said that's nothing like what it is that firefighters do, because firefighters spend most of their time trying to prevent themselves from having to do firefighting, because firefighting is dangerous. And what do? They spend a lot of time improving themselves. A lot of that's through things like training, drills, making sure they know exactly where things are, making sure that everything is in the right position, and then also from learning from others, and whether that's learning from other professions or learning from other scenarios. Apparently the domestic fire service has learned an awful lot from the world of naval firefighting. That's the ships, not the tummy button. But naval firefighting is a really high risk occupation, because if you don't get it out, then you all die because you're on a boat in the middle of the sea. So there's lots to be learned from there. But they also learn by going and visiting people and seeing people and understanding the buildings in their patch and what they're like. They have shifted their mindset, or their mindset is always on the position of our job is to improve how we work to reduce down firefighting. And if you think more like a firefighter, you will find time and space for play. Next up, be happy being childlike. The Protestant work ethic and other similar sorts of thought frameworks are deeply prevalent in our society. If you're not absolutely hating doing work, you can't be working hard enough. If you're enjoying yourself, you cannot be working hard enough, because to really be able to get through to the wonders of the next life, you have to have suffered in this one. Absolute balderdash, but discomfort comes from finding yourself feeling like you are doing childlike things, and actually being innovative and doing change and finding new ways to do things often involves doing childlike things. Childlike, not childish, although a bit of childishness as well never goes amiss. And then the final one in the Deviate section is disrupt yourself. If you are expecting other people to change, you need to be able to demonstrate how you yourself do change yourself. When was the last time you went and did something different? When was the last time you thought about something differently at work? When was the last time that you took an approach that you'd never tried before? When was the last time you put yourself outside of your comfort zone? Hopefully the cards will help you do that. So how do they work? Well, we've got 13 skills, and then we've got 4 suits, 52 cards. It's genius. The suits are based loosely on a thing called Kolb's learning cycle. And Kolb was a psychologist who looked at the way in which people learn things, and the way that we learn things according to Kolb, and it's just a model, so take from it what you will, but was that we will do something, we will reflect on it, we will plan to do things differently, and then we will execute different thing next time, and we will reflect on it, and we will plan, and we'll change, and then we'll do, and then we'll reflect, and we'll plan, and we'll change, and we do, and we refine what we do as we go. And if we don't ever get the time to reflect, we just do things the same thing again and again and again and again. And so the cards, basically, each card has got, I'll just grab them over here, one of the values, one of the skills at the top, one in colour down the bottom there, one of the suits, and in the middle an instruction. Now you can use them to be able to just take those instructions and run with them. You can use them to be able to take those instructions as a prompt for ideas, or you can ignore the instructions altogether and just work with this as a way of being able to randomize out, pulling out skills. And I'm going to talk you through now 3 pretty simple games that you could play with the cards to be able to start to experiment. And I'm really keen to be able to understand how these games work, and I'm also really keen to be able to understand new games that you might come up with. Let me know. I'm really keen to be able to understand how you might use them better. So here we go. That's what the cards look like, sort of. I've got the back done so far, but the beautiful front is something that I've been working with an artist in Kingston called Ellie Dellison, and this is all lino cut, so this all came from physical stuff and ink and things, and has been turned into digital prototypes, and then the ones that you've got in your hand at the moment, if you're part of the prototype test group. So, game 1. Play training. So what this is going to do, and you can choose to do this once a day, once a week, once an hour, up to you, is you take the deck of cards, you place them down, you shuffle them, you draw 1 card, and that's your instruction for the next period. So I've picked out work out loud, take one thing that you regularly create, you update others about what you're doing, and put it online. So I'll take my weekly project status report, take anything sensitive out of it, and then stick it on my blog. There we go. You get the idea? Really, really simple. Now, it might seem a bit weird. Why am I trusting my future into the random drawing of a card? But the thing is, we do it all the time. We play the lottery. People play things like poker. We actually quite like putting our trust in the random drawing of a card. It's something that humans do all the time. So as a way of being able to work out a quick, skills improvement thing, each of those instructions will help you develop on each of the 13 skills. That's a bargain. Okay, so that's game number 1. Have a think about it, have a play with it, try it with other people. Okay, another game. This one, it's got darker, by the way. Time has moved on. Anyway, number 2 game. This is drawing on a really simple little mechanic that comes from the world of improvisation. So improvisational comedy and improvisational theatre. And it's a thing called yes and. And it works very simply in that you, in a small group, even actually you could do this on your own, you come up with ideas and you build on the ideas that are given to you by using the words yes and, rather than do what we often do when new ideas are thrown up in front of us, which is to say no. So the way that this game would work, if you're in a small group, I'm going to do it on my own because I'm here on my own, but you would draw a card and then use this as a way of thinking. We're just going to focus on the skill. We're not going to worry about the prompt on the cards this time. And you'd use this as a way to be able to think about how, say, you might run a change initiative. So we've got a 3-year program where we need to change our business and we need to improve our profitability by 70%. So not what will we do, but what do we need in that program to be able to make sure that it will work. So I'll draw a card, and the first card as I've got is minimize time to product. So we're going to do this 3-year program, yes, and we will find effective measures to be able to allow people to be able to prototype new ideas as quickly as possible using a group of customers that we have set up to be able to be a testing ground for new ideas. Next card is minimize time to product. Again, I'll do a different one. So be happy being childlike. So yes, and we will issue everybody in that group with a set of Lego so that they can build up little mechanical ideas of what it is that we're going to do to be able to increase our ability to deliver. And then the next card is make time for play. So yes, and we'll ensure all staff have got 2 hours a week where they actually get that time ring fenced to be able to work on new ideas for being able to deliver the 3-year plan. Next card, experiment, don't fail. Yes, and we will ask people when they're going to do a test with this customer group to be able to write it out as a hypothesis and test criteria, and what will show proof and what will show disproof. And so it goes on. And what that enables you to do is just have some random input coming into ideation exercises, or random input coming into when you're thinking about the structures and the things you need to put in place for a successful change initiative. Some of the ideas might be crap, some of them might be great, doesn't matter. It's about volume over quality at this stage, and that's actually just a very quick way of doing it. And so yes and is a really powerful little mechanic that enables you to do that. So 3rd game coming up. Here we go. The 3rd game. Right, now this is a game that helps people to start in a group to be able to understand what they're comfortable with and what they're not comfortable with, and understanding the comfort zones of others as well. So if you imagine in a small group of maybe 3 or 4 people, again, you can do this on yourself. You can also use it as a way to be able to coach somebody. You're going to take a card, you're going to randomly draw it. That one is scale transactions, foster interactions, and we're back to using the prompt here. And with this one, what parts of your work are transactions, what parts of your work demand interactions with others, draw them in a Venn diagram. So for me, in terms of the scale of comfort to discomfort, I'm completely comfortable with doing that, so that I'll put that over on this side. You can't see it there, but you get the idea. Next card, how many versus diversify your network. How many people do you know professionally, outside of your organization, outside of your profession, outside of your industry? So it's a reflection exercise. Again, I've got no problem with doing that. Tend to find that with reflection exercises, people are fairly comfortable with most of them because they don't actually ask you to do anything particular. Next one, be an artist. This is a do, and create an exhibition of your recent work. Invite friends and family to the grand opening. Now, this is something that I have recently done, and I then presented it to my team, and I felt deeply uneasy, and I felt massively self-absorbed and egotistical. I then presented it to somebody I was just having a sort of catch up with, and again felt, so I find this one actually really quite uncomfortable, but I'm really glad I did it because it taught me a lot about how my career has panned out in a series of things that I have done as opposed to a series of jobs that I've done, and it's been a very interesting exercise to do it, but the presenting it to other people bit I find really uncomfortable. So that'd be over at this side of the discomfort, and you just carry on going there and you have conversations about it, so whether that's with the individual or whether that's in small groups. I've done this at scale with 20 or 30 people with a digital version of the cards, and as being able to use it, get everybody to take a few cards, map them out, and then start to have conversations with the group about where there are gaps, and are there particular skills for innovation out of the 13 that people find rather comforting or discomforting, and have they got gaps within their team about things that nobody wants to do, and if so, what might they do about that? How do they understand that they've got these things that are outside of comfort zone, and are they avoiding things that are outside of their comfort zone more than anything else? Having that conversation about the emotions that this stuff makes people feel, I think, is really useful, because it's not really, you just think about skills and capabilities as these kind of weirdly very neutral things, and they're not, and they tap into our psyche and all sorts of things. So anyway, third game there, comfort zones. You can also put it into 2 dimensions, because as you saw at the beginning of this, I love a 2x2, and you can put it into 2 dimensions where the second dimension is this something you have done or not, and then you can start to have an interesting discussion there with individuals or with yourself or with other with groups to be able to just explore there. And again, spotting gaps is the thing that's really interesting within all of that. So anyway, 3 games to get you started. Let's see what happens next. What happens next is with the product. So what I'm doing at the moment is using this as an ability to be able to, again, test the content. I would love to hear from you about what you find if you're part of the prototyping team, the test team. I'd love to know what works, what doesn't, if there's particular cards that you find particularly useful or inspiring, if there's ones that you just go, don't understand the point of that at all. Now, because of comfort and discomfort, that's almost certainly going to happen, and it's different for different people, but I want to see weed out if there's any particularly weak cards within the set of 52. I'm doing this because at the moment I'm in conversations with Pipdex, who are the people who publish Storyteller Tactics and Workshop Tactics, and they've got others in the pipeline, and hopefully Playcards are going to be in their pipeline. We're still in conversation about it, but I'm working with Charles at Pipdex, and this feedback as well is really helpful for us to be able to validate whether it's a good idea to be able to put it into market or not. I do think it's a good idea, but I also have imposter syndrome about it as well, and does anybody really think it's very useful? So I want to know, I want to get your feedback on it. I want you to share with me what you think about the model, about the cards. If you're not part of the physical testing group, there's a virtual set at the address that you can see on the screen there, playingcards.io/YP2UG5, sexy URL, and you'll be able to play in a browser with the cards there. The browser version is a shared workspace, so if somebody else is in it at the same time, you'll start to see the cards moving around or not, as the case may be. So just to let you know that, but usually there's only one person at a time using it, so that's cool. So there we go. You can get in touch with me on Twitter at Ballantyne70. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. You can get in touch with me via my website. You can get in touch with me through sending me a letter if you've got my address, which you will have if you have got a set of the cards, but probably electronic methods are better. I might drop a line out to people as well, just to be able to ask for specific questions of feedback, but I'm kind of leaving it fairly loosely structured at the moment because I want to see, I don't want to ask questions that are preempting answers, is the basic point there. That's it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for listening to me prattle on for half an hour. Hopefully you found it interesting. Hopefully you found it piqued your curiosity about getting involved with the play cards. Maybe even has piqued your curiosity enough to want to buy some. exciting stuff. Thank you. Keep in touch. It's been a delight.